I can't get past Peter's mother-in-law. There are all these other things I want to get to in the gospel passage and in the Isaiah passage, but she just won't let me go. For those of you who don't know, when I say Peter, I'm referring to the same man that the passage calls Simon. He has a name change later in the gospel, and the name Peter is what we have come to know him by in the church. Peter, meaning the rock on which the church was built. The fact that I can't get past this seems sort of funny because there's not that much of a story here. It's 2 verses, simply. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. And yet somehow this story just won't let me go. One part might be obvious. I actually do try to let my feminist guard down when I read the scriptures and say, well, those were different times, but I can't do it here. She's unnamed, which indicates that Mark didn't think she was that important, because even important women get named in the Gospels. But even worse than that, as soon as she's healed, she gets up and serves. While not entirely resolving this issue, Debbie Thompson offered some helpful insight about the word here used, the verb serve in Greek. And she says, the verb St. Mark uses to describe the mother-in-law's service is the same verb the Gospels use to describe the angels who attend Jesus after his 40 days in the wilderness. It is the same verb Jesus uses to describe himself when he washes the disciples' feet. I am among you as one who serves. And it is the same verb the early church uses to commission deacons, the servant leaders of the church. What if Simon's mother-in-law is not an undervalued woman in a patriarchal system, but the church's first deacon, the first person Jesus liberates and commissions into service for God? That helps a bit. I still don't love that she gets healed and starts serving. But if I'm honest, I know those people. The ones with such profound servant hearts that nothing short of profound illness could keep them from offering exceptional hospitality. The ones who would get up from a sickbed and start cooking immediately if the opportunity arose. And if I'm perfectly honest, not all those I know who would do this are women. The other little bit of new insight into this passage came from my beloved commentary, the social science commentary on the Synoptic Gospels, which pointed out what should have been obvious. Galilee in the time of Jesus was patriarchal. No, there's another point. In particular, that means that when a couple got married, the woman left her home and went to live with her husband's family, which means that it's actually quite weird that Peter's mother-in-law lived with them. It indicates that she had run out of those who should have taken care of her. Her husband, her sons, her father, her brothers. I even think that her cousins should have been responsible for her care before her son-in-law. Nevertheless, she was there. And nevertheless, this story keeps getting further under my skin. Peter's mother-in-law as a widow without sons, living in the home of some fishermen. And while there is some debate on this, I don't think fishermen were doing well in the socioeconomic systems of the day. And all of them are in Galilee, which is the backwater portion of the backwater Jewish portion of the great Roman Empire. Peter's mother-in-law is yet another figure in the Gospels who would have been ignored and counted as unimportant by society. Peter's mother-in-law is yet another piece of proof that the way of Jesus is not the way of the world. I'm still sad she's unnamed, I'm still sad she jumps up to serve them, but I am glad that the story says they told Jesus about her at once. The family cared about her, and then Jesus cared about her. Just because she was a poor widow didn't mean she was unloved by her family. That's obvious. Value in society doesn't have any relation to the value a person has to their own beloveds. Many of the most moving celebrations of life that I have presided over have been for caring mothers, many of whom never worked outside the home, others of whom had jobs that were notably secondary to their roles as caregivers. As far as today's society is concerned, stay-at-home mothers aren't particularly notable. But as far as their families are concerned, they were the center of their world. Similarly, most of the imperative lessons I've learned in life have been from campers with special needs and from those living without homes. Both are populations that the world tends to overlook. And yet, interpersonally, people are people with wisdom, gifts, and love to share. I think deep down, we all know that the things that make a person matter in society aren't at all related to what matters in day-to-day life. And of course, in the eyes of God, everyone matters. When it came to Peter's mother-in-law, they didn't hesitate or confer about whether or not she mattered enough to bring her illness to the attention of Jesus, thanks be to God, because of course she mattered. Would any of us decline to ask for help for a beloved family member? And Jesus had just healed in the synagogue in front of her family members, so there was good data available on his abilities. I keep thinking about how society teaches each of us our place and teaches us how to inhabit that place. Things that don't really matter in life get under our skin. Who walks down the street with head held high? Who carefully avoids eye contact? Whose language is considered appropriate for a business meeting? Whose appearance is considered appropriate? Or who has the right to be angry about how life turned out and to take their anger into explosions of violence on others? We are well trained by society, enough so that it is notable whenever people buck those trends. I'm now at an age where most of the time people assume that I am reasonably capable. But 10 or 15 years ago, as a young woman in ministry, that was less true. I often got invited to sit on committees where I was the only young woman, and often I could tell that people thought I should be grateful to be allowed to be present and keep my mouth shut while the people who knew what they were talking about made decisions. Thanks be to God, I was raised in the Jesus movement and formed in the radical ways of Jesus. And I assumed that if I had a place at the table, I had the responsibility to use it. It is clear that Jesus doesn't give two figs about the roles that society prescribes to us. A beloved child of God was sick. Jesus had the capacity to heal, and he healed her. He reached out to touch her, even though she was an unknown woman to him, even though she was ill. And if this perfectly ordinary woman was seen and healed by Jesus, then we can be assured that our perfectly ordinary lives are also seen by Jesus, and God's healing energy is available to us as well. For me, Peter's unnamed mother-in-law serves as a reminder of the sacredness of the ordinary. God is in each of us. God's value is on each of us. And ordinary lives are saturated with the capacity to be filled with love and thereby change the world. In our culture, which, like many before it, often pushes us to think that we have to be extraordinary to matter, it is good to be reminded of the sacredness of the ordinary. Thanks be to God. Amen.